something that is called a problem of global imbalances. Huge balance of payments deficits or surpluses in countries like the United States, like Germany, like Japan, like China. And these imbalances basically pose huge risks for the system. For instance, during the last 10 years, we have had massive capital inflows into the United States, to finance the imbalances, the deficit of the United States. And if there were to be a reversal of these flows, this is going to have very dramatic implications for instance, the dollar. So this is one area in which there is a great scope for international cooperation. It's not happening to the extent that I think it should, and therefore we are postponing, in some sense, into the future, addressing this problem. In fact, one of the things that worries me a little bit about the current environment is that essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to go back to where we were a few years ago. We're trying to replicate the same kinds of conditions that we had during the boom times of 2003, 2004, 5, 6, 7, and so on. And I worry about that because I think that the crisis actually demands a different approach and demands our addressing these problems in a much more proactive way. Let me go to the last part of my presentation. And here, my main thesis is essentially that the mechanisms of international cooperation that we presently have in place are highly inadequate to the global challenges that we face. And here, the list is long, and I'm sure that you can add to this list, as I mentioned. Whether we talk about climate change and all the environmental calamities associated to it, whether we talk about nuclear proliferation in countries like Korea, Iran, and other places, the workings of the global financial system, which we are talking about today, whether we talk about growing income disparities in the world, massive violation of human rights in places like Darfur, like Zimbabwe, like Myanmar, the cowardly persecution of the Baha'is by the current regime in the Islamic Republic of Iran, the distributions of the benefits of international trade, and so on and so on and so forth, add to this list, all of them global problems. They are being neglected because we don't have effective problem-solving mechanisms and institutions strong enough to deal with them. And I think that is really the major problem, the major challenge that we have, at the outset of the 21st century. Or if you want to put it in another way, you can say that basically global crisis today cannot be solved outside of a framework of global collective action involving supranational cooperation. Essentially, we are living in a world, and I think that the financial crisis has made this very explicit, if it wasn't explicit enough in the previous years, which I think it was, but now, if you have any doubts, I think that you shouldn't have any, that human institutions are basically struggling to rise to the challenges of rapid change because they were designed for another era. Bonnie, when she introduced me, said that I had been res rep for the IMF in Russia for many years, and it's true. I was an economist at the IMF for more than a decade, and I can tell you, this organization, as competent as it sometimes can be, read the World Economic Outlook, for instance, which they publish twice a year, is really the best document and the best analysis that there exists in terms of the short-term prospects for the global economy. This organization is essentially the organization that was created in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference. In fact, until the G20 summit of London last April, the IMF had more resources when it was created in 1944 than it had now, during this latest crisis, which is really shocking if you think about it. It has not been able to adapt itself, to all the changes that have taken place in the past half century in the global economy. The nation state is in crisis.